Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Prime Business. I am Pius Kojobaka. Looking at our stories, Ghana's reference rate, which is the key benchmark in the determination of interest rates in the country, has gone down marginally. It dropped from 15.68% to 14.58% for the month of February. More in this report.
The decline can be said to have been influenced by improvement in key indicators used in calculating the Ghana reference rate, including the monetary policy rate, which has been cut by a significant margin by the Bank of Ghana to 15.5%. Other factors include the Treasury bill rate ending January and the interbank market rate used by commercial banks over the past month. The drop can be described as a 1.1% decline from the previous month. However, some market watchers say the recent cut in the policy rate played a significant role in the revision. In terms of impact, individuals and businesses that negotiated their loans with commercial banks at a variable rate could witness some marginal reduction in borrowing costs. Additionally, those looking to secure loans from commercial banks within next month may also benefit from slight reductions. However, customers who negotiated their loans at fixed rate may not experience any reduction in the cost of servicing their facilities. The cut comes at a time when banks have been accused of not doing enough to reduce interest rates in line with policy rate cut over the past year. Some businesses, on the other hand, argue that they are still struggling to access credit despite these developments.
Well, on the back of that, the Ghana Association of Banks says its members have begun reviewing their benchmarks for determining interest rates following the marginal drop of the Ghana reference rate to 14.58% in February 2026. Now, speaking to Joy Business, the chief executive of the association, John Iwa, said the move to review the benchmark reflects the ongoing efforts to align lending rates with the current economic conditions.
Always announce the first Wednesday of each month. And the new rate will then go into the sanction decisions of the banks. But one thing that we all have to note for sure is a reduction in the rate does not necessarily change the risk profile of a certain client. Of course, the more affordable the lending rate is, the better the propensity customer to repay the loan. But it doesn't change the overall risk profile of that customer. So to the extent that the credit environment is still a bit shaky, you may not see the risk premium reducing significantly for the full force of the benefit to transmit into the new lending rate.
But realistically, when are we likely to see the rate reflect when you go to borrow?
From today, if you go to your bank today, the reference rate the bank is going to add the risk premium to is the new Ghana reference rate, and that should give you a reduced rate. And if you have an existing loan that you signed a variable loan contract with your bank, at the next repricing, which depending on your loan contract, it's definitely stated in there. The next repricing, you will find the full force of the new reference rate in that loan. But as we say every time, if you sign on to a fixed rate loan, you don't get the benefit. In the same way, if the rates are going up and you have signed a fixed rate loan, you also reap the other side of the benefit.
Very well. In some other news, inflation for the month of January slowed significantly to 3.8% from the 5.4% posted in December last year. And this marks the 13th consecutive decline and the lowest rate since the rebasing of prices in 2021. Speaking at a news conference, government statistician Dr. Hassan Idrisu highlighted the role of food prices in inflation reaching record levels. Here's more.
The data represents a significant drop from the 23.5% recorded in January 2025 and a further decline from the 5.4% inflation rate in December 2025. On a month-on-month basis, inflation stood at 0.2%, indicating only a marginal increase in the general price level between December and January.
The data tell a very clear story. Inflation has fallen sharply and consistently over the year. Price pressures are easing across most components of the CPI. While challenges remain, particularly in some regions and food categories, the overall trend is positive. This creates space for planning, confidence, and recovery. In summary, in terms of numbers, we are talking about January 2026 recording an inflation rate of 3.8%.
Both food and non-food inflation eased during the period. Food inflation declined to 3.9%, while non-food inflation also slowed to 3.9%, although non-food prices rose slightly on a month-on-month basis. Inflation for locally produced items fell to 2%, compared with 4.3% for imported goods, pointing to continued cost pressures linked to import.
Food inflation at 3.9%, non-food inflation at 3.9% as well. Goods inflation at 3.6%, services inflation at 4%, inflation for locally produced items at 4.5%.
However, regional disparities persist. The Northeast region recorded the highest inflation at 11.2%, while the Savannah region posted the lowest at 2.6%.
And then we have regional differences, which shows that Northeast recorded the highest inflation at 11.2%, and Savannah recorded the lowest at negative 2.6%.
Government statistician Dr. Hassan Idrisu urged government to sustain effort to stabilize food prices and increase investment in storage, irrigation, transport infrastructure, and market access to help reduce regional inflation disparities.
For government, it's important to sustain the fiscal discipline, continue efforts to stabilize food prices, and invest in storage, irrigation, transport, and market access to reduce regional disparities.
The Ghana Statistical Service says to sustain this inflation trend signals improving macroeconomic stability, which could help ease cost of living pressures for households and businesses in the months ahead.
Now, reacting to the development, economist Professor Peter Quartey said increased investment in the agricultural sector is critical to sustaining the disinflation trend and further easing locally produced inflation.
Well, the transmission mechanism is certainly going to be through the banks also adjusting their rates, because they will use the reference rate to do that, and that fits into the calculation. So certainly the banks will adjust their lending rates, and the cost of credit is going to come down, and that is going to translate into easing, some kind of easing for consumers, customers, etc. So that is a transmission channel that we're seeing, and that could also have repercussions on cost of living. Clearly, I mean, I like the way the data is aggregated, so it tells you what to do as a government. If we are importing inflation, then it means that, which is slightly higher than the price of locally produced goods, then the obvious policy choice is to continue to support local production. Yes, we are benefiting from the good weather, but I don't think that is sustainable. Let's support the value chain. Let's have irrigated agriculture.
All right.
Let's ensure that storage, etc., is supported, so we can continue to enjoy stable food prices.
Away from inflation and its related stories, Vice President Professor J. Nano Pukwajiman has urged governments across Africa to play a more active role in creating an enabling environment for the private sector scale-up trade and infrastructure development on the continent. She made these remarks at the 2026 Africa Prosperity Dialogue.
Across the continent today, we are seeing sustained efforts, deeper coordination, and increasingly confident leadership. The task now is to convert this momentum into a durable economic transformation. That requires clarity of focus, expanding trade within Africa, and implementing the industrial strategies that strengthen priority sectors, build skills, support sustainable production. We must continue to invest in infrastructure and connectivity while establishing the conditions for innovation and technology. Behind all this, strong institutions and effective governance are essential to sustain progress. Ghana is actively contributing to this shared agenda. Our 24-hour economy initiative is designed to unlock productivity, by better coordinating infrastructure, finance, and institutions, ensuring that businesses and workers are no longer constrained by avoidable bottlenecks or lost time. Along this, the government's Big Push Infrastructure Development Program is laying the foundation for trade and industrial growth while aligning Ghana's national priorities with those of ECOWAS and the African Union. Governments must generate long-term and medium-term policies and grow strong development finance institutions and regional projects that reflect the scale of our collective ambition.
A while longer the ceremony because the second deputy governor of the Bank of Ghana, Matilda Asante-Asiedu, has called for the inclusive growth of Africa's payment system, stressing that trade agreements alone are not enough to drive trade on the continent. According to her, strengthening Africa's payment infrastructure would not only deepen trade integration, but also enhance skills development and unlock new economic opportunities across the continent.
Africa must increasingly be settled in African currencies, all the transactions done in Africa, through African infrastructure and supported by African institutions. And we believe that central banks play a very critical role in fostering this innovation while safeguarding stability and public confidence. So the agenda is fundamentally about inclusive growth. SMEs, which we're focusing on today, account for over 90% of Africa's businesses. Women dominate in these informal sector trades. Young Africans are leading the continent's digital revolution. Yet, high transaction costs and payment inefficiencies disproportionately affect these groups. Therefore, we believe that removing these barriers will unlock scale and strengthen competitiveness, as well as expand opportunities across Africa. So as we look ahead, our collective priorities, we believe, must be to harmonize regulatory standards across borders, advance licensing passports across African countries, strengthen digital public infrastructure, expand cross-border mobile money and instant payment pilots, and as the chairperson said, move from pilots to full-scale execution, and then broaden digital onboarding and payments acceptance infrastructure for the SME sector.
Now, the World Bank Group and the International Finance Corporation have released the Be Ready report, which revealed that imports take about 23 days to clear border agencies in Ghana compared to about 7 days in competitor economies such as Morocco, revealing significant gaps between policy design and service delivery. The findings were discussed at a high-level working session focused on accelerating Ghana's 24-hour economy agenda here in Accra.
The report highlights trade delays as key constraints. Imports take about 23 days to clear border agencies in Ghana, compared to about 7 days in competitor economies such as Morocco and Vietnam. Operational challenges extend to land administration, building permits, electricity reliability, and internet stability, all of which increase the cost of uncertainty of doing business. World Bank Division Director for Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, Robert Talisio, highlighted the need for efficient implementation of regulations.
I think the key finding, if I could summarize it in one sentence, is that while Ghana's regulatory framework actually compares relatively well to countries across the world, the challenge really is more on the implementation of those good regulations. And so there are quite a number of areas where the implementation simply doesn't match what's promised in the regulations. And this is holding Ghana back from delivering growth and jobs.
Senior country manager for Ghana and Liberia at the International Finance Corporation, Kel Kelhofer, emphasized the need to empower the private sector to create jobs.
We're all here to create more and better jobs for the people in Ghana. And we've seen one of the key drivers, over 90% of jobs in Africa are brought through the business sector and the private sector. And one of the key opportunities is this opportunities on value addition, whether it's increased agricultural productivity, increased manufacturing productivity, whether export or import substitution. We're keen on working with stakeholders and businesses, both international and local, to help create more and better jobs.
Presidential advisor on the 24-hour economy, Gusi Tano, called for efficient collaboration between the public and private sectors to spur growth.
If you want to develop a private sector and make it a true engine of development, then the public service has to be responsive to that private sector, make things a bit easier, even as they enforce the requirements of the regulations. And I think the most important thing is that if you look at the operational efficiency section, which deals with how people are able to manage compliance, if we're not doing too well, it means that we need to do a lot more to get the private sector more savvy, able to meet the compliance requirements of the regulation.
The findings were discussed at a high-level working sessions themed Be Ready Ghana 2026, Bottlenecks, Solutions and Public-Private Troubleshooting for Accelerating the 24-Hour Delivery, which brought together senior government officials, selected private sector leaders and World Bank Group teams.
This evening, cocoa prices are under renewed pressure due to weakening global demand. My colleague Winston Taki examines what this decline means for the cocoa sector and its wider impact on the economy in the following report.
Global cocoa prices have fallen sharply at the start of 2026, raising fresh concerns over Ghana's export earnings and rural incomes. As at January 22nd, cocoa futures in both New York and London are trading at a multi-year lows, weighed down by weakening global demand for chocolate, particularly in Europe and parts of Asia. For Ghana, the world's second largest cocoa producer, the price decline comes at a sensitive time, with cocoa remaining a major source of foreign exchange and government revenue. Lower prices could narrow export receipts and complicate fiscal planning, despite ongoing effort to stabilize the economy. Industry data show a sharp slowdown in cocoa grinders in key consuming markets, signaling softer demand even as favorable weather conditions in West Africa point to improved harvest prospects this season. While stronger output may support supply, analysts warn that prolonged demand weaknesses and rising inventories could continue to cap prices, exposing farmers to income pressures and increasing volatility in Ghana's cocoa sector through 2026.
Let's now take the commodities update. And we have the latest currency update for today for you. Thanks so much for your company. I am Pius Kojobaka. Razak is next with Prime Sports.